This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This episode is the Astral Wind. Before we get into it, just want to mention a couple things. Patreon. If you'd like to support the important work of Astral Club, you can do so on Patreon as a patron. You get downloaded episode library that you can put on your podcast app and listen to anywhere. There's no commercials, email where we can talk back and forth. And of course, you get your advanced videos on Sunday. Next up, private lessons. If you're interested in a private lesson to learn astral projection with me, be more than glad to help. Just look in the description and you will see an email where you can ask for information. And the Patreon link is in the description as well. And don't forget the playlists. If you're interested in certain subjects in astral projection, I've got aliens and time travel, dimensional travel. There's, of course, regular Astral Club episodes. So, Astral Guide School episodes. So, if you're interested in any of those topics, look for the playlists. Okay, let's get into it. The Astral Wind. Now, I'm going to be using one of my favorite reference materials for this, and of course, I'll be making my own comments. It's Astral Dynamics by Robert Bruce. And I love this book because it's a great reference material. They seem to talk about just about everything to do with astral projection, and they usually do a pretty darn good job of it. I always thought that if I was going to teach a college course in astral projection, this would be one of my textbooks. So let's get into what Mr. Bruce has to say about the astral wind. He says, if you project regularly into the real time zone, and by the real time zone, he means pretty much the here and now. When you leave your body, you're generally in the here now, in the very lowest level of the astral, very close to the physical. Now, normally you don't want to spend a lot of time in this particular place because your astral projections are going to be short. But many new people, just as a matter of course, and end up in this particular, as Bruce calls it, real-time zone. And this is where the astral wind can be encountered. It's where I've encountered it. Now, nowadays, it's been a long time since I've experienced the astral wind because as soon as I leave my body, I am transporting myself through time or dimensions or in higher levels of the astral. So I don't really encounter the astral wind anymore. But in the old days, I encountered it on a number of occasions, and each time it mystified me. But let's look into what he has to say about it. He says the astral wind is one of the most awesomely powerful natural forces in the universe, and it's more dramatic and noticeable when experienced during a conscious, real-time astral projection. He believes it's caused by something he calls the Akashic pulse. And he's sure some projectors out there will recognize this following scenario. And he believes that while some projectors clearly remember these experiences, many people just have dream fragments and vague impressions of a memory of this type of irresistible wind. He said, when you are traveling about the real time zone, minding your own business, when all of a sudden you're gripped by an irresistible force, you feel yourself being dragged away against your will, usually backwards. It feels like you're being blown away by an incredibly strong wind, but you cannot feel or hear anything resembling a wind. I know when I first I first encountered the astral wind, I thought I was being pulled back to my body, but instead I was kind of buffeted around and taken somewhere else. Now, I think I felt the wind, but it could have been my own mind reacting to this force that I can't see. And typically when you're being blown about in the physical world, when you're outside, it typically is the wind, and you know what the wind feels like. So I always wonder how is it really felt, or is it generated by your own mind that you expect to feel something? And in the astral, you're extremely suggestive, so it's not surprising that you might. Anyway, he goes on to say, it feels like you're being blown by this incredibly strong wind, and everything's quiet. There's no noticeable disturbance in the surrounding environment, and I can attest to that. I don't recall seeing anything else like trees or anything being blown around. The astral wind is similar to a feeling caused by a physical body when it attempts to reclaim its projected double. In other words, being pulled back into your body. Like I said, the first time I encountered it, I thought I was being pulled back into my body. Now, he felt no anxiety, no feeling of dread or weakness, just an irresistible force dragging you away. I remember just kind of going with it because I thought I was being pulled back to my body, and it was only later that I realized that I was being taken somewhere else. He goes on to ask, why does this happen? Where does it take you? What does it do to you? He said that you may fight the astral wind for a few moments. I never really tried to fight it. And he says it feels as if you're battling a silent hurricane force wind, and I can attest to the strength of that wind force. And this grows progressively stronger until you're dragged away, seemingly by the scruff of the neck, up into the sky and the great beyond. He goes on to say you can watch your house dwindle beneath you. You see rooftops and all the rest of that. Then you're eventually deposited into a mundane setting, sometimes recognizable, maybe only a few months into the past or future, more usually the future. I remember the first time that I was taken up by the astral wind, and I was deposited in a distant, well, it wasn't distant, it was about 100 years in the future, I estimate, in my hometown. And things weren't looking so great from what I could see. Many of the houses were boarded up and abandoned, and they looked, the residents looked very rough. They looked like they were not doing all that well financially. So that was not the funnest experience that I've ever had. He says the astral wind experience may appear to be unrelated to you. You may see and interact with these people or total strangers or both. I didn't interact with anyone. I just kind of walked about, observing what remained of my hometown. Sometimes these other people will be aware of your presence. I don't think anybody was aware of my presence. He says that there also may be other astral people who are wondering about, confused as well. I don't recall seeing anyone else in my cases. He says you may witness a real-life scene from your past or future. I consider this to be the future in my experience. You may feel you are just a point of consciousness without a body. That wasn't my case. An invisible spectator seen in all directions at once. You may arrive somewhere in a distant past, observe old events. Anyway, the one thing they have in common is there doesn't seem to be any reason for any of this usually apparent at the time. Like, why are you here? How did you get here? Why are you here? Mr. Bruce and myself aren't the only ones to experience the astral wind. First of all, I've heard it from many other projectors, but it's also mentioned in one of my favorite books, not Journeys Out of the Body necessarily, but it was in the projection of the astral body by Sylvan Muldoon. He called this phenomena a superconscious projection, and he described it as caused by a higher intelligence forcibly taking the projector to a higher dimensional level for obscure reasons. I'm not sure about that. I think that may have been more of Muldoon's reading into this occurrence. I think sometimes people have a default set of reasoning that if something happens to them, there must be some plan behind it, either a very good plan or a very evil plan. But what I find more often than not is when things happen, it's because they happen. And there is very much such a thing as chance. And there's things that happen that just occur. They used to say S happens. when I was a kid. And in my opinion, I believe Bruce's opinion as well, this may not necessarily be a higher intelligence projecting this wind, but it may be some sort of semi-intelligent or perhaps just a force of astral nature. Who knows? However, the most popular theory is that the astral wind force is a high-level demonstration by spirit, giving some cryptic proof or purpose or meaning to the projector or why they're there. That's what Bruce says. I'm not sure I agree with that. But I can't be sure either. Maybe I'm taking the opposite view, that in the absence of proof of intelligence, I'm making an assumption that there isn't an intelligence, and perhaps in a different way, I'm making a similar type of assumption and perhaps a mistake. At any rate, so what is the purpose of the astral wind and how does it work? How does it apply to all of us down here on Earth in the physical universe? Well, first and foremost, the vast majority of people, as we're all well aware, do not have conscious out-of-the-body experiences or astral projections. And most frequent projectors, which Bruce considers a very small minority, and I have to agree with him there, spend only a short time in the real time zone before shifting into the astral planes. And the reason we do that is if you stay in the real time zone very close to the physical, you're not going to be in the projection mode for very long. You're going to get pulled back to your physical body. That's why I started traveling in time, for instance, into the future, because that was a kind of a cheat code to extend my projections. A real-time astral wind is an experience. It's far more down-to-earth and recognizable than its astral plane counterpart, which I haven't experienced on the astral. This has just been the real-time astral wind that I've experienced. Because memories of the astral wind experience above the real-time zone appear to be greatly affected by the base level of understandability. The physical brain's translation of this type of higher level experience apparently does not allow wholly recognizable memories to form after the projected double reintegrates with the physical body. Once again, that's a textbook way of saying that you have a hard time remembering what happened when the astral wind blew you around when you get back to your body. I think that can certainly be true, especially with newer projectors, the ones who are more likely to spend more time in the quote-unquote real-time zone. Now, it's fairly obvious that the astral wind cannot be explained away as a high-level spirit contact for sure. It might be a spontaneous type of contact, or maybe some sort of super consciousness that's operating completely independently from anything to do with the average astral projector. We don't really have a lot of clues here. All we have are suppositions. All we have is an individual projector who is most probably inexperienced, and as such, they're out of their body. And they're happy about that, and they start operating in this, what Bruce calls a real-time zone, or I might call the very lowest level of the astral, very close to the physical. They're very new with the experience. They're not very good at perhaps remembering the experiences. They're not very good at controlling their astral body. And then they find themselves taken up by this mysterious wind and planted somewhere seemingly at random. And so it's hard for them when they get returned to their body to remember what happened, much less make sense of what happened. Now, there's probably a number of explanations for this. It might be some higher force operating for some reason we don't know. There may be some sort of higher level functioning going on, some super consciousness somewhere that is generating this wind quite independently from anything to do with an individual astral projector. Or it just might be some sort of a natural energy pulse that is emitted or generated in the real-time zone, much like we have storms and hurricanes and tornadoes here in the physical. At any rate, that is the astral wind, and if you have encountered it in the past, please, why don't you leave some comments? If you have some questions about the experience, go ahead and please leave those in the comments section as well. If you like this, please hit the like button, share it with those of like mind, subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure the bell is solid so you're notified on Wednesday and Saturday when the new episodes are posted. And stay tuned, because on Saturday, there's going to be a very special episode where we talk about the stages of possession and exorcism. This is Rick, and as always, I will see you on the astral plane.